Well, hello. So, welcome to my stream. I'm Daisy. I am a developer advocate for, um, I work for Automatic and I work primarily on the WordPress open source project with a focus on block theme development and how that is going to play into the future for theme developers across the WordPress ecosystem. And this is my first stream of 2023, hoping to make it a little more consistent than I was last year. So schedule is Fridays at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, which is right about now. Yeah, so this is unstructured, unscripted, and kind of a co-working vibe. So my goal is to start with a project. This project is going to be to build a starter theme. In the future, I hope to use that starter theme to build more specific themes. But for right now, we're just going to try to keep it really simple and walk through things that we can do, things that maybe we can't do, and maybe workarounds, what might be coming, what might be in the Gutenberg plugin available to us, and then what is available to us now. And I don't know, try to identify some workflows and pain points and maybe figure out what could cause me trouble and then by extension cause others trouble so that we can feed that back into the development process. So that's the big idea. And I am really looking forward to doing this with you all. So, while I'm just going to run with it, I'm probably going to go quiet a little bit here and there. I might share when I'm thinking about something, and I'll try to keep an eye on chat. So if you have any questions or observations or suggestions, please feel free to share them. All right, so let's start by sharing my screen. All right, that should be the right one. So the screen we're looking at right now is the interface for local. It is a really simple way to set up tons of local development WordPress sites. It can do some other things too, but for my use case, I just spin up a whole lot of WordPress sites. As you can see, there's like tons of things in the left sidebar there. And we need to have a place to, test out our features to see how it looks. And so I'm going to start by creating a local site just for this stream. And we'll do that now. So if you're interested in, or not familiar with the software, check out localwp.com and you can download it. It's available for all major operating systems, and I think it's great. So I'm going to create a new site, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it LiveStream. I'll continue. I'm going to use my preferred. So that's going to put me on PHP 8.1.9, Nginx web server, and MySQL 8.0.16. So that's a pretty solid starting point. Now, PHP 8 is kind of like beta supported by WordPress, but what that really means is there's still like a few quirky things that have to be worked out. For most people, it's not going to be a problem. So, and certainly not for my development environment. All right. Yeah, Linda, web dev Linda, I agree. I will go through and wipe out um, old sites sometimes and occasionally accidentally wipe out something that I still needed. So, um, you know, your mileage may vary. All right, so I'm gonna put in a username. And mostly this username and password doesn't matter because there's a cool auto login feature, which saves me a whole lot of headache on these local sites where security is really not a major factor. But I put in a password anyway. We don't need to do any advanced options because we're not doing the multi-site. That's the only option available. And this WordPress email is just a local host email. I don't want it sending me emails. So then it's going to start setting it up. It will ask you to, if you're on Mac, it will ask you to enter your system password to confirm that you really do want to make the changes to your system, because it's setting up like a virtual server in order to run the WordPress site in a container. All right, so I've got my site spun up, and the first thing that I always do is enable one-click admin. And what that does is it means that anytime I open up this interface in local, I can just click WP admin or open site and I'll be logged in already. So very convenient. So let's go ahead and do that. It did open, but it opened in a different window, and that is not what I intended. So somewhere in here, I think I have a Chrome window. And here we are, our brand new site. I can start by dismissing this, and I debated whether or not I would develop this with just core WordPress or with the Gutenberg plugin. And I'm leaning towards developing with Gutenberg plugin because I'm going to be able to tap into new things much, much more quickly, since that launches every 2 weeks with new features, fixes, sometimes bugs. But it's the most cutting edge way to do what I'm going to be doing here. So I'm going to install Gutenberg and activate it. And so now I'll be able to work with some new things. And then there are some experiments. These are kind of interesting. So I'm going to enable the Global Styles Custom CSS and also the Block Inspector tabs. Okay. Test new off-canvas editor for navigation block. Yeah. All right, we're just going to enable all of them. I'm going to live on the edge here. There's another plugin that can be very helpful if you're new to block theme development. And that is the block theme. I've forgotten what it's called. Create block theme. Create block theme. This is a community effort plugin that adds some things that help with the initial creation of a block theme. And so I've gone ahead and I've installed and activated that. So let's go ahead and see what that gives me access to. I haven't used this for a few months, actually. So, and I know that there's been some change. So if you go into Create Block Theme, you get a few options. One is you can export the theme that's active on the site right now, which, because this is a brand new site, it's the default theme of 2023, which is in fact a block theme. We can create a child theme of the active theme. We can clone the active theme, which means it'll make a complete copy that you can then edit directly as your own theme without overwriting anything. It completely disconnects it from the theme it was cloned from, as opposed to the child theme, which is just a little shell to do customizations and override the parent theme. We have the option to overwrite 2023, and what that means is if you use the site editor, which we will be using as I go through building this theme. And you want to make all of the database level changes that you've saved, templates, global styles, template parts and templates. If you want those all to get saved back to the files for your theme, this is a really great way to do this. So it'll save everything back to the theme. It'll wipe out the database save settings, and then you have a theme that can be portable to another site at that point. So you could then export the theme either from here or from the regular site editor export and install it on another site. It will not include media that is part of the site as far as like stored in your media library, but it will include all of the markup, all of the templates, all of the template parts, all of the style variations, anything that you've created for your theme. The next one is a great place to start if you want to just get started with from a minimal starting point is generate a boilerplate theme. It's pretty minimal. It's even more minimal than the 2023 theme, which is pretty minimal. And create a style variation would be to create just a theme.json. Basically, it's a JSON file that will apply different settings from the main theme. And as I build a theme, you'll see what the theme.json is if you're not familiar. Question from the chat is if we overwrite, what happens on a theme update? That's a great question. So if you overwrite and it's a theme that can be updated from an external source, whether that be from a premium theme company or or the theme directory, the official theme directory, if you have a theme update, it's going to rewrite all of those changes. So you do not want to overwrite to the original theme that you installed that might get an external update. Now, external updates typically are not run automatically, although there is a way you can actually enable that, I believe. So my advice would be that you should only use a base theme that you created yourself or a child theme. And now if you save your changes back to a child theme, it's going to save them to the child theme directory and not to the parent theme, which is the original. So those are the two options. So from the create block theme settings that are on the screen now, I would say either first thing, either create a 2023 child theme and then go and activate it, or clone your active theme and then go and activate that. And then you're working from a really solid starting point that you don't have to worry is going to get written over again. But the flip side of that is if you clone your theme, then you're going to miss out on updates to that original theme and you might have to like merge them in manually or something like that. So you are basically freezing it at a point in time and making it yours. It's effectively a fork at that point. It isn't going to benefit from any further development that's done by the original author. So, you know, your mileage may vary. The child theme is a good option if you have a theme that's, you know, pretty complex, might be getting those external updates, security, new features, things like that. But once you've started to modify it, there's no guarantee that future changes are going to be compatible with what you've created. Oh, let's see. I've got a couple more questions here. Will the overwrite include your sample headings and paragraphs? So anything that's part of the templates or template parts in when you're working in your site editor is going to be included. If it is content from your site, as in like you went into a post or a page and edited the content, that will not be included in the export. If you overwrite, could you change the name in the CSS style sheet to avoid updates? Yes. Although not the name in the CSS style sheet, that won't do it. You need to change the name of the directory where the theme is stored. That's actually how the update gets matched up, is the directory name. WordPress uses what's in style.css to distinguish from one theme to another. So, yeah. So it gets complicated for sure. All right. So because I want to share a little bit about what a really basic theme looks like first before we start creating our own, I'm going to go ahead and create a blank theme. And it's going to ask me to fill in this information. The only thing that's actually required is the theme name. So I'm just going to say boilerplate. Ooh, if I can type. I got a new keyboard and I don't love it. So it wasn't very expensive, but there you have it. All right, so now it does not activate your theme for you. You have to go and do that. So I'm going to go do that now. And it also doesn't have an image to start with. So it'd be kind of cool if that boilerplate had a image. Um, in fact, this is when things are going to go silly because um, I am going to see if I can find this, and I'm going to see if there's an issue for that. So this is how we contribute back to the project, is we go and check out the GitHub or the track in the case of WordPress core, and we see if the idea or observation that we have might actually already have been suggested or reported. And so I'm going to look through open issues, and we're going to search for thumbnail. That seems like a good search. Nope. Okay. Image. Okay. Yep. I don't see anything, so I'm going to go ahead and open a new issue. Um, what did they call that? Great block theme boilerplate. Okay. It would be great if there were a way, if there was a simple placeholder image included with the blank boilerplate theme. Okay. It'd be great if there were. Grammarly's helping me, and then it's going to tell me that this is, it helped me make that sentence better, except it doesn't seem to catch it all at once. All right. I don't just blindly accept Grammarly's suggestions, just in case anybody was wondering. But it does help me catch where I'm missing commas. That seems to be my nemesis, the missing comma. All right, so now that's been captured. Um, so that others besides me can see it and act on it if they choose to. Um, I could actually just create an image and submit a pull request that just includes that image in the boilerplate theme. So it would take like 10 minutes to spin that up probably. I don't know if I'll do that. Maybe. We'll see. But this is the simple, these are little ways that you can contribute. It doesn't always have to be big, huge features that might require a lot more than a lot of people are prepared to invest the time for. But something like include an image, and then, you know, in the code, let's see, maybe it's in assets. We have a boilerplate here, and this is the basic theme. So it's including some things. There are a few things that are generated, like the style.css is not included here because that's created by the plugin. But if we just included a screenshot here, then it would be part of the ultimate boilerplate, and then it wouldn't have like the weird checker view in the here. So it's just a little pet peeve. But all right, so let's go ahead, and there are a couple things I still want to do today that I don't know how much code we're going to get to, because, you know, explaining this stuff hopefully is a little bit helpful. And also getting a little off on little helpful tangents that might help move other things forward is also good. So I am now over in VS Code. What I'm going to do is open the directory for the theme here so that we can look at the files. So the easiest way to get to it is to go back to local and go to site folder. So when I do that, you can't see it, but here, we'll do this. I think I need a better background for these screen shares so that it's not just the default from Mac. All right, so here's the folder for my site. The folder, the site's files are actually with an app and then public. And then you can see, if you're familiar with the file structure of WordPress, you can see all of the files, and then themes are stored within WP content and then themes. So now within here, we see the 3 themes that are included with a brand new install as of today, and our new theme boilerplate. So if I want to open this folder into VS Code, what I can do, I'm going to not have this expanded now. And let's put this over the top. So now I can see both VS Code and my file manager. And I'm going to open up the whole themes folder. So if it will let me, there we go. So I just drag the folder over the window and it's going to open it for me. Another thing that we're going to do is when we start creating a scratch theme, a theme from nothing, empty directory, we're going to hook that up to my GitHub repo that will stay current for anything that I do for this live stream, and that's what we're going to do after we look through these files. So we have boilerplate. So here's what we have right now. So there's a README file that is generated by the plugin, and most of it is just generic. The boilerplate part, I'm not sure if that's generated or not. I think it might be. I think it's included as part of the theme creation process, and I put in the word boilerplate for the theme name, and also it's got a current copyright and the license that it's under, and any theme for WordPress should be licensed under GPL. And we can move over to style.css. So this is kind of cool. Style.css, I don't know, some people might think it's not cool. Style.css in a block theme mostly exists to give WordPress some metadata. It's to give WordPress this information about the theme so that it can either the WordPress install or the theme directory, if it's a published theme, we'll know what the deal is with this theme. So we only entered in the theme name. All the rest of it is pretty basic. We have to have at least 5.8, WordPress 5.8. It's tested up to 5.9. That seems like it could use a little bit of updating because we should definitely be tested up to 6.1 now. So let's go back to here. Uh, it looks like it's already been reported. It's been closed, and there is a merge here, but it probably hasn't been released yet. So I think I'm going to subscribe to this, and then I'm going to come back and try to figure out if where they're at with releasing an update, because that seems like it would be a good thing to have. It's minor. It doesn't have any functional um, impact on the theme. Okay, so now let's look at templates. That's the next thing. This theme, boilerplate theme, very, very minimal, includes only one file. It's an index.html file. And what this is it's the block theme equivalent of index.php. It is a required file. So you have to, for a block theme or for any WordPress theme to be valid, there are certain required files. And you need to have either an index.php file or an index.html file. In the case of an index.html file, I think in either case, they don't have to have anything in them for the theme to be activated, but the site's going to show nothing on the front end if there's nothing in this file. Basically, the index template is the ultimate fallback if a more specific template for the view, it doesn't exist. So if you're looking at a category archive, for example, and there isn't anything more specific from the template hierarchy to pull the content for, then it's going to show index. It kind of like trickles down. It's a cascade, just like CSS. Let's see. Uh, so in this file, we have some pretty basic block markup, and I'm going to collapse some things so it's easier to read. What you have is these commented out sections. That's the block code. So you're going to have an opening and an ending tag. Sometimes they're going to be all in one line if there's nothing to embed in it, kind of like an HR link, an HR tag in HTML where you don't really need to have it open and close separately because there's nothing inside of it. That's a simple explanation for why this is this way. So we have the open and then we have the close at the end. And it's commented out so that we have backwards compatibility with pre or non-Gutenberg, non-block editor process. So what that basically translates to is if for example you have a theme that has some block code in it or a site that has block code and then you switch to something like classic editor or something, your HTML portion of your site content is still going to be intact, and then none of this stuff, which is all for server-side work, is going to be displayed on the front end. It might be in the output if it's moved over to something that isn't Gutenberg block editor, but it won't be visible to users without inspecting the code. So the way that the code starts though, and it's just JSON. So JSON is a little bit like a CSV. If you're not familiar with what JSON is, it's a it's standard markup system, I guess you could say. And it's mostly used for things like configurations. It's JavaScript is where its roots are. It's used for things that are not necessarily JavaScript oriented. But in this case, it is JavaScript oriented because Gutenberg is a React app and React is JavaScript. So all of these block tags are going to start with WP colon. It says WordPress colon, and then it's going to have the name of the block that it references. So in this case, we have WP colon template part. So this is a template part block. Then we have the data, the metadata about this block. So we're saying the slug for this block is header and the tag name is also header. So if we were to break this out into a more readable format, the way that we would write JSON on our own, it would look more like this. So in fact, we would actually probably do that and that. So this is JSON. It's saying JSON are like key value pairs. So you have a name of something and what its value is. So the name is slug, the value is header. And then WordPress can use that to figure out what to do with this little bit of code. The next one down is we have WP query. So this is a query block. And this is what basically, if you're familiar with the old way of doing themes, the classic themes in PHP, you have the loop. This is kind of the replacement for the loop, the query loop block. So, and then we start to actually get a little bit of HTML markup included. We do get some markup that is is contained within the block as wrapper containers. And then we also have the blocks within the blocks. So blocks get nested indefinitely, really. You can have container block after container block, and they get nested inside of each other. So there's a lot you can do in terms of how you structure your code if you're familiar with the way the block markup is set up. In this case, we've got just the default markup for these blocks, with only a few things that maybe is a little bit more opinionated, like we've got a style set here in this group with a specific font size. Should we be putting those sizes in a boilerplate theme? I'm not entirely sure. Certainly you want to have them in a fully designed theme. There is going to be some of this type of stuff that's going to say this specific block should have these settings, and the settings are set in the site editor. So we'll move over there in a second to see what this all looks like within WordPress. And then we just have a whole bunch of other loop related things. This is basically saying this is the way I want individual things on my site to look. What information I want to include. So we've got a post title, we've got a featured image, we've got post content, we have some author and some other meta information about the post, the author, the date, categories and tags. We've got a spacer, so that's just saying 40 pixels right here. It ends up being an empty div. So there's a question, why did the first two have the stroke at the end but not the middle one? So the reason that this one has a stroke at the end is because it's opening and closing in one go. This one does not have it because it actually keeps going all the way down here. So it's there, it's just separated. So the close is after all of the interior stuff. So it's not any different than you would have if you're opening and closing a div in your HTML. You have your open here, and then down here you would close it. But there are things in the middle that are their own tags with their own open and closes. Ultimately, everything you see here is valid HTML. It's a little uncommon outside of WordPress to see this kind of information in a comment tag, but it was done for some pretty solid reasons, in terms of not making your content only ever compatible with WordPress and the block editor. Uh, so if you've ever used certain shortcode heavy plugins or themes, and then turned that off, suddenly your site is an ocean of shortcodes, and that's not so great. So this is an alternative to that. All right, where are we? What else can we do? Keep the questions coming. That's great. And if I've missed something or something didn't make sense, I'd be happy to clarify. All right, so let's move on from this file. We'll see all of the blocks that are included in another way shortly. The next part is parts. So in this file, we've got this first thing. We've got our header template part. And then at the bottom, we have a footer template part. Headers and footers are a really straightforward use case for template parts, but you could use template parts in a whole lot of ways. You could use them as like a reusable set of blocks that might be used across multiple templates, or you might use it for sidebars, or like a what we used to call widgetized home pages. Instead of widget areas, you could use template parts to control those things. So line 8 after true, is there one too many curly brackets? Let's see. Line 8. Nope, there are not. So if I do what I did before and break this down, you'll see here momentarily that there's a nesting that happens. So actually I'll do this, and then we have the end of that one, and then we have the end of this one. So you can see it all nests correctly. So we have curly brackets within curly brackets. All right. All right, so back to our template part. So if we think of headers and footers, traditionally would have been PHP files that then get called in through, they would have been like header.php, footer.php. They get loaded in through WP header and WP footer along with other things. So this is a little simpler. Again, we have just straight HTML. Here we have something kind of interesting. We have some text being included, text strings being included here. When they are like this, just as straight HTML, they're not translatable. So this text is stuck in English in the way that this is right now. The best workaround would be to convert this to a block pattern, which is actually PHP code, and then you can wrap it in translation tags so that it could then be translated in the normal way. All right. All right, so these are the blocks that are in the footer for this boilerplate theme. We have a group block, which is just a wrapper, just holds things together. And then we have another group within that that's got some styling applied to it. Padding, top and bottom padding is what's being added there. And then we have a paragraph block, and in the paragraph block is this powered by WordPress link. and then everything closes out, and that's it for the footer. And then the header looks a lot like that. It's a little more in terms of what blocks are included, but it's the same basic idea. You've got container blocks like a group. You have a site logo, you have a site title, the site tagline. Now, the blocks that you're going to include in your actual theme are mostly going to be the theme-oriented blocks. These are usually dynamic blocks that are pulling information that's saved at the site level. These are things like your site logo. That is something that you would set for your site from something in your media gallery. It isn't going to become part of the theme. The image reference won't actually be part of the theme. So it gets saved to the database. The site title and tagline is the same thing. You're actually saving that to your settings. Navigation is going to be pulling in navigation blocks. This is an area of theme of block theming and full site editing, or the site editor, that's still heavily under development. So we're going to continue to see changes here and huge improvements in how it works. I think the goal is to try to get the user experience really dialed in, and it has some challenges associated with it, some things that it's hard to meet the needs of everyone with this kind of a system. So it is a work in progress. Okay, so that's the basic parts of the pretty much the most basic theme that you can have. One file we haven't looked at yet is theme.json. So let's go ahead and jump over there. So when you have theme.json, the idea behind this theme is that you're going to have settings and styles. So it's broken down into main areas. So I'm going to collapse it down so we only see the top level things. We have a schema that we're setting. This schema line makes it a lot easier to code this file. It's going to give me, at least in this editor, auto completion and tooltips and such that are specific to this structure. I wouldn't want to create this file without that being here. There, you might see different URLs here. This is using the trunk URL that is because I had Gutenberg installed. If you didn't have the Gutenberg plugin installed and activated and you created the boilerplate theme, this would actually pull in the schema for your current version of WordPress. And you don't really need to keep it updated to your version of WordPress. But if you start making changes that are like including new things, you probably want to update this so that you can see the more recent things that have been added. All right, so Linda says the improvements are a double-edged sword for new users. It continues to evolve to make the user experience easier, but the rapid changes can be frustrating for new users just learning. Yeah, that is one of the challenges, and I don't know the solution to that. It is hard to keep. It's even for those of us that are working full time on this, it's hard to keep up with the changes. Sometimes they're visual, sometimes they're code based, and it is a lot. But I think it's the only way forward. So just keep doing the best we can with it, and eventually things are going to get a little easier because the user interface is going to be pretty set. And then we'll only be adding new things as we move along. And I would argue that in every case, we actually have seen good improvements. So, job security for web developers. That's the truth. And trainers. All right, so we've got our schema, and then the next thing down is settings. This is where there are basically two main things that you're going to see here. One is you're going to see what I usually call theme supports. It's kind of a throwback to the way that they used to be, things used to be enabled or disabled in functions.php. Oh, segue. You may notice that there was no functions.php. There are no PHP files at all in this boilerplate theme. If you wanted to use something that was going to rely on the main WordPress API, that was going to pull in files, like you need to enqueue a script or something, you would need to add that file, and that's where your PHP would go. All right, so we have our settings. So that's the theme support. So anything that's a true or false in here is going to be is basically a theme support. And it's basically, are you enabling or disabling some aspect of the blocks? So this appearance tools one is actually like a group toggle. It enables a bunch of things. I don't remember all of them, and it might have actually changed, but it's the newer features that maybe are still being kind of field tested, you could say. They're not going away, but maybe we don't think that it's a good idea for them to get auto mass up enabled for everyone that has this kind of a theme. So that enables a bunch of those things. Block gap. That's a pretty good one. Like, you might not want to enable block gap across the board, but if you're familiar with it and you're ready to use it, you can enable it individually. But a lot of folks that are pretty confident that with where Gutenberg's at, or just the core block editor, what has already been rolled into core is, and they want access to those newer features for their theme, they're going to enable this. So it's enabled here in the boilerplate. That is the only theme support that we have. So I'm going to go over and look at the docs. So we have developer.wordpress.org. These are the docs for developers. The things related to block themes are kind of split a little bit. Things that are really brand new, not yet, maybe not yet in core, are going to be in the block editor area. And then as things get integrated into core, the idea is that they are integrated into the themes area. So the only handbook in here that should have things that are not in core is the block editor handbook. So, but I'm gonna go ahead and open up a couple of these tabs. There is in here the living reference for theme.json. So if you want to know what the most up-to-date options are, this is probably, aside from going into the source code and parsing it out yourself manually, this is the best tool we have. So, and this is all generated based on what's in the schema file, or a lot of it is. So we can kind of go down and say, okay, well, we've got in our settings section, we have appearance tools, and here are the things that enables: border, color, radius, style, and width, color link. We have spacing of block gap margin padding, typography of line height, and there are a couple of others that might need to be updated here. I think that just this week we got, at least in theme.json, access to do box shadows. So it doesn't have a user interface yet, but something will be coming at some point. But that just went out in the most recent Gutenberg release, I believe. Use root padding aware alignments. Some of these, like, you have to know what's going on to know how to use it, whether or not it's pertinent to you. That might be something to explore at some point. We have border, shadow, some of these. So anything where the default says true or false, those are your theme supports. So if I had border and I wanted to disable border radiuses, and appearance tools was enabled. So, because the default is false, but if I set appearance tools to true, then it's going to set it to true. So let's say I said, I want everything in appearance tools except border radius. Then I would set radius to be false in my theme.json file. So those are the theme supports. The other area of theme.json that's in the settings area are basically presets. They are a list of options that become available to select in the block controls. So things like color palettes, predefined duotones and gradients. Let's see what else we have. We have content size and wide size under layout. These are more like single values that get set. So I would still call that a preset. The units under spacing would be that because it populates a drop down with these options. And then in typography, these are relatively recently added ones, font sizes and font families. Well, font sizes is not new. That's been there for a long time. Large, extra large, I don't know, gargantuan, I think I've seen a few times. I don't know what all the sizes are, but and they can be configured on a per theme basis. And then we have the ability to do font families. And the custom fonts API is still in development. It's going to get better. Right now, it's basically local fonts, I'm pretty sure. I think though that you can load fonts in to your theme from the create block theme here. So I haven't tried this, but there's a thing to add a Google font. So you can select the one that you want, and then you can quickly add it to your theme. So that's pretty handy. And why this is important, one is it's super easy if you can just do it right from this kind of user interface. But two is that it's going to actually grab the files for that and store them locally so you don't end up with trouble with GDPR, since Google fonts are not Google fonts are not GDPR compliant, or that is my understanding. And of course, no matter where you are, GDPR is going to affect you because the internet is not geographically confined. All right, so that was the settings area of theme.json. Let me go back to the file and see what we've got to look at next. All right, so settings. So we've got our layout is set. That's really important. The layout for content size and wide size. If you're using a theme that's got the site editor enabled at all, these values need to be set, or else you're going to end up with crazy blown out containers because your site isn't going to know how wide you wanted things to be. So this needs to be configured. And if you don't have a theme.json file, then there's a PHP way of setting these values. Spacing is the drop down for the units. I don't know how necessary this really is in the boilerplate, but it's there. And then we have one system font that is set for typography. So it's a pretty basic font stack that should cover most people's computers of what their system font is. System fonts are good because they make your site extremely fast to load. There isn't anything to custom fonts are great. They're beautiful. They're, bespoke looking. They can be very fancy, but they all have to be loaded from files that are downloaded from a server somewhere. And so a system font is helpful for that because it doesn't have to be. And I think that there are also some potential accessibility benefits for using a system font stack. I don't know enough about that to speak on what that exactly looks like, but I feel like it's something that I have heard. All right. So that was settings. The next one down is template parts. Basically what this is doing is saying we have two template parts in our theme, and this is the area that they're associated with and their name. So the area is basically there are three possible options. One is general, which if you don't put something in here, it's going to go into the general area. And then header and footer are the other two. So if you have something you're using for any area that's not a header or a footer, then you will you don't have to put anything in here for it because it doesn't need to be declared. All right, so let's see. I have a question. I think I saw a question. What layout values would you suggest, or should we keep it the way it is? Your layout values are going to be very much determined by the design of your site. If you think of basically, you get three options. You get full width, which is pretty self-explanatory. Your full width is the full width of the window that you're being displayed in, the site's displayed in. The content side is basically the default size. So if you think of a center aligned theme with the content width in the middle, that's going to be that size. And let's say you had your content size was 620. So that's the example here. And you also had elements that you wanted to be a little bit wider than that, but not the same width as the regular content. So you wanted to be able to say set a header that was not full width but was also wider than the content size. Then you could set the block to be wide size. So that's, other than that, it's all very design dependent. All right, so we've looked at template parts, and then the last part here is version. The version is 2 right now. I don't know how long that will stay to, probably until something major changes in the way that this file is structured. So it's been 2 for a while now, and it just basically tells WordPress what it can expect to see in this file. There's another area that is not here. There are no styles set in this boilerplate theme. So to see some styles, we can actually go to a more complete theme like 2023. Settings, here we go. So styles are basically setting the default design controls for your blocks. So if you add a block and don't make any changes, what should it look like? What should the options be set to? So it could be things like your background color and your text color. You can set to be specific colors. And in the case that's on my screen now, there is a variable here. So we use CSS custom properties pretty liberally in theme.json. So up in the settings, we will have defined our color palette with base, contrast, primary, secondary, and tertiary. And there's a hex code for each of those. And these are the things that are in the color palette within your site editor or within when you're working with blocks that have a color option. These are the theme-based color options that will be available. And you could change them to what would be good for your site. And you can add more. If you need more than these basic ones, you can add them and name them to your heart's content. There is there's a line of thinking, and I tend to agree with it, that there should be a pretty solid base palette of color options. They don't have to have the same colors assigned to them in terms of hex codes, but a base, contrast, primary, secondary, tertiary is one model that could be good. There's what I tend to try to avoid is naming colors based on what color they are right now. I'm much more interested in naming colors for how they are being used on the site, more of a semantic approach. Because one day your primary red for your site's branding may not be red anymore. That's just the reality of rebranding and how style guides change over time. I have a question here. Can you create template parts through the site editor? If so, does that update your theme.json file with the new template parts? Okay, so you can create template parts through the site editor, yes. It will update your theme.json file with the new template parts if you're using the create block plugin and you save your user changes back to your theme. So that's the short version. If you have something that's been created as a header block or as a footer block, it should, I believe, I have not actually tested this, but it should save that and include it in your theme JSON. But it does not go back to your theme JSON unless you do that. It will only be in the database, so it'll be good on that one site while that theme is active. All right, so um, back to styles. So it might be easier to explain some of the styles by going into the site editor. So why don't we head over there now? Um, so if I go into editor, oh, I love this. This changed a little bit since the last time I used this. I took a break for the holidays and then everything changed. Um, this used to not stay open like this. So you can see your templates and template parts here. It loads in the basics of your main template. It is the only template that the site has right now, but we can go in here to edit, which is pretty cool. And then if you click the W again, it pops that sidebar back out. I like that. All right, so if you create a template part, you can, I assume, click this little plus sign. It used to be somewhere else on the screen. And then you choose what you want this template part to be, which area it should be. So if I want to make a new header, I can say header 2, select header from this list, and then create. And it creates a blank header. It doesn't have anything pre-populated. So I would have to go in and add my blocks. So I can say I want, actually I don't want an image. If you are not familiar with list view, start using it. It is amazing. It is life-changing in terms of navigating your blocks and how they look in a hierarchical sort of way. I really love it. So let's see, site logo. That's a good one to include in a header. And then I can say I also want site title and site tagline. That's about the most basic you can get for a header. I didn't include any container blocks to give it some structure. But let's see what happens if I save this back to, I don't know how to get out of here. There's no exit. Oh, there it is. Okay. That was not intuitive to me. Hmm. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I guess it's not just the new users that struggle with these UI changes. Create block theme. We are going into here and I'm going to overwrite boilerplate. Save user changes as theme changes. So I'll generate that. And now if I go back to here and go into the boilerplate theme, let's see what we have. So I have parts. Oh, there's header 2. It's been saved back to the files. And then if I go into theme.json, it did not add it. So that you would have to do manually. Ooh, fingers in the wrong place. Oops, area first. So that's how you would do that. Important thing if you are working in JSON and you're used to working in PHP, when you have lists or arrays, the final item does not get a comma. It will break. So, yeah. So it's probably the most common error you're going to find in your JSON is that you accidentally added a straight comma at the end of a comma separated list of things. So, all right. So I think the only other thing I wanted to try to accomplish today was to get a GitHub repo set up. So I am going to go ahead, create a GitHub repo called Livestream Code, and I will be including that in future stream descriptions to make it easier. Okay. Okay, it's going to be public. We'll use a GPL license. And sure, we can add a README file that will give me some code to start off with. I think what I'm going to do is include a themes and a plugins directory here so that if you were to clone the repo down to a site, it would just, everything would go where it was supposed to. That's what I'm thinking I'll do. Okay. What do I do? Thinking out loud now. Eh, we'll see how it goes. This might not work, but we're gonna try it. Okay, so we are going to I might need to I was thinking that I would maybe include both themes and plugins in this because there might be a point where I create a plugin to accompany a theme, and I expect that will be the case. So I'm going to close this window. And then instead, I'm going to open up WP content. Instead, I'm going to save this as a workspace. It's going to take a little bit of configuring because I don't necessarily want to include everything in the repo, so I'm going to have to do a pretty good get ignore. But the ultimate idea is that whatever code I create for this stream is going to end up on the repo. So ultimately, that's the way it's going to be. Yeah, I think I went about this the wrong way. I think I'll do this off camera. It's going to take me a bit to get my thinking straight on this. But so in the meantime, one last thing before I sign off for today is let's just create my version of a starter theme, which is going to be very incomplete. We'll call it Daisy on WP Starter. And in this folder, I am going to create a theme.json file. I'm not going to do much to add code. A style.css file, and then a templates directory, a arts directory. Oops, I just put that in the wrong place. Okay. In here, we're going to have a header.html and a footer.html. We're going to add a index.html. For my starter theme, it's not just going to be a boilerplate. It's going to be a pretty complete theme that doesn't have a lot of style on it. That's my plan. So I could say, well, I want to have a single post view. I want to have category. I want to have a home page. And so there will be some more intricacies here that may not be appropriate for the boilerplate theme. So I think it's going to be fun to build this, and we will start on that next Friday. So until then, I really appreciate everyone that has joined, and I hope to see you all next week. So thanks.